Starship Troopers has recently been a pretty preeminent topic of conversation here on the internet, which I think is pretty interesting. I read Starship Troopers a few months ago now, because I think it was November. I spent $90 on a few books back there, and one of them was Starship Troopers. I really wanted to read Starship Troopers. I have long since um, been a fan. I had watched the film, probably too young to be watching that film, but I'd watched it a long time ago, and I just thought it was fantastic. I thought it was funny. I thought it was witty. I thought it was um, really invigorating and engaging. And I'd often heard that the book was kind of in the same spirit, but wildly different. And so when I finally sat down and actually read Starship Troopers, I was taken aback by how fantastic it was. I loved it. I thought it was a great book. I thought that it was honestly better than the film, which I was not expecting it to be better than the film. So when I read Starship Troopers, I was like, damn, I need to make a video about this because it honestly had a lot of engaging, interesting, and philosophical ideas that people don't know about. So let me go over here. Let's get my copy of Starship Troopers, and I put down. I don't know if you can see. I put down um, all of the philosophical elements, and well, I'll just talk about them quickly. So, page 118 of Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein. Uh, it it discusses a issue that I think is quite pressing if you look at it in the context of uh, the world in the modern day. Um, because really, what Robert Heinlein is talking about, what the character, uh, Mr. Dubois, of course, the history and moral philosophy teacher, what he's talking about in this section is, well, the life that we're living. It is the world that we live in. So I'm just going to read it verbatim, and I think maybe at some point I may make a video where I just read all of the history and moral philosophy sections verbatim just to put them on the internet because they don't exist anywhere else. They don't exist anywhere else. So anyway, I will read it. I find myself mulling over a discussion in our class in history and moral philosophy. Mr. Dubois was talking about the disorders that preceded the breakup of the North American Republic back in the 20th century. It says XX. I don't know if that was a stylistic choice to say it's all technically it could be any time, but XX means 20, so I don't know. According to him, there was a time just before they went down the drain when such crimes as Dillinger's, who it was a guy in the book who murdered a baby, were common as dogfights. The terror had not just been in North America. Russia and the British Isles had it too, as well as other places, but it reached its peak in North America, shortly before things went to pieces. Law-abiding people, Dubois had told us, hardly dared go into a public park at night. So, I don't know who's watching this video, but I live in Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada. In Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada, there's a public park called Galt Gardens. It used to be a very nice place. When I was a child, it was a very nice place. They had a water park and everything. Well, Galt Gardens has a bit of a reputation now. Galt Gardens is where drug addicts go to die. So, if you are going around Galt Gardens, you don't, you just don't. You're going to that area to go to the mall, or sometimes the police will they'll clear it out for a day because they're having some kind of event there. But typically speaking, on any old day, you don't go to Galt Gardens. You just don't. So, Robert Hyland talks about a time where law abiding people hardly dare go into a public park at night. Well, I don't go into a public park during the day. Nobody would. No law abiding person goes to Galt Gardens. Um, that's during the daytime. And there was a big protest where a number of people, excuse me, um, the Lethbridge City Council wanted to put up a fence around Galt Gardens to try and do anything to stop all the crime and the stabbings. My stepfather got stabbed in that park. My uncle got mugged in that park. And so Lethbridge City Council wanted to build a fence. Whatever. Like, that's going to fix anything. But I supported the fence because it was something. It was something to stop the wanton criminality. Anyway, people protested the fence and called it racist, imperialist, colonialist. They made all sorts of posters calling it a colonialist farce, an extension of the imperialist, racist, whatever. So, this being the case, that these people going there and trying to say that this was some kind of extension of systemic oppression, BS. But right next to City Hall in Lethbridge, there is the cenotaph. There's the cenotaph for the veterans. And of course, anyone who's anyone, knows that, of course, at the time of World War I and World War II, the flag of Canada, before it was illegally and wrongfully changed against the wills of the Canadian people, was the Union Jack. And so they want to say that this is an extension of imperialism. Well, I showed them that I don't care if it's imperialism. We're here. We have the ancestry, and we have a right to go into a public park without being stabbed. So I brought this flag. I got this flag, I put it on a flagpole, and I walked into the protest. Ooh. And there was a rather unintelligent young man. I say young, but I'm pretty sure he was 29 years old. And I'll put pictures here up on the screen, he choked me out and tried to break my flagpole in half. And he ended up succeeding, but only because I would refuse to give it to him. So my own body weight, being pulled against this guy, tore my flagpole in half. Anyway, the police arrested that guy. Because obviously they would arrest him. A criminal, supporting criminals, and snapping my flagpole in half and choking me out on the street, grabbing me by my tie. But, of course, we live in an unjust society Crown prosecutor dropped the charges. And then they spread all sorts of libel about me on the internet. There's a guy named, what's his face? I don't know. I don't care about them. But they write on their Twitter accounts, their Reddit accounts, the Instagram accounts, they say that I'm some kind of racist white supremacist. Because what? Because what? Because I am a law-abiding citizen. And I can't go to a public park. To do so was to risk attack by wolf packs of children, armed with chains, knives, homemade guns, bludgeons, to be hurt at least, robbed most certainly. Injured for life probably, or even killed. How many hospitals go away from Gulf Gardens every single day? This went on for years, right up to the war between the Russo-Anglo-American alliance and the Chinese hegemony. Murder, drug addiction, larceny, assault, and vandalism were commonplace. Nor were parks the only places these things happened. Also on the street, in daylight. Stafford Drive? You're telling me. Okay, again, let me give some context. For some reason, I don't know which government it was that signed off on this, but they built a safe consumption site in the middle of the city. Now, what's a safe consumption site? A safe consumption site is where they give homeless people free drugs. Now, why would you go and do a thing like that? I don't know. I'm not a policymaker. I'm an 18-year-old. But I can tell you, you don't do that. Don't give homeless people free drugs. I've been homeless. I've lived out of the back of derelict party store buildings and unlivable conditions, so says Child Protective Services. So I've lived in whatever, right? And, and I've lived with drug addicts. Had them in my own home. Had them steal my things. I had a very nice china set that I got. It was very sentimental to me. I bought it with my father. And it's been stolen from me. And I'll tell you, you don't do that. That's really, really, really not smart. But despite that, they did that. And now, you're going on Stafford Drive, you gotta go to Great Canadian Oil Change. I know someone who works at Great Canadian Oil Change, and they have to deal with wanton crime and robbery every single day. So that's not very cool. These things happened on school grounds, even inside school buildings. Ask my sister. But parks were so notoriously unsafe that honest people stayed clear of them after dark. Sorry, Heinlein. You should have said in the daytime. I had tried to imagine such things happening in our schools. I simply couldn't. I wish. Nor in our parks. A park was a place for fun, not for getting hurt. As for getting killed in one, Mr. Dubois, didn't they have police? Or courts? Well, the police were fine. The police arrested the guy who assaulted me. The courts, not so much. They had many more police than we have, and more courts, all overworked. I guess I don't get it. If a boy in our city had done anything half that bad, well, he and his father would have been flogged side by side. But such things didn't happen. Mr. Dubois then demanded of me, define a juvenile delinquent. One of those kids. The ones who used to beat people up. Wrong. Huh? But the book said, my apologies. Your textbook does so state. But calling a tail a leg does not make a name fit. Juvenile delinquent is a contradiction in terms, one which gives people a clue to their problem, but the failure to solve it. Have you ever raised a puppy? Yes, sir. Did you housebreak him? Yes, sir, eventually. It was my slowness in this that caused my mother to rule that dogs must stay out of the house. Ah, yes. When your puppy made mistakes, were you angry? What? Why, he didn't know any better. He was just a puppy. What did you do? Why, I scolded him, and I rubbed his nose in it, and I paddled him. Surely he could not understand your words. No, but he could tell I was sore at him. But did you just say that you were not angry? Mr. Dubois had an infuriating way of getting a person mixed up. No, but I had to make him think I was. He had to learn, didn't he? Conceded. But having made it clear to him that you disapproved, how could you be so cruel as to spank him as well? You said the poor beastie didn't know that he was doing wrong, yet you inflicted pain. Justify yourself. Or are you a sadist? Ugh. I didn't then know what a sadist was, but I knew pups. Mr. Dubois, you have to. You scold him so that he knows he's in trouble. You rub his nose in it so that he will know what trouble you mean. You paddle him so that he darn well won't do it again. And you have to do it right away. It doesn't do a bit of good to punish him later. You'll just confuse him. Even so, he won't learn from one lesson, so you watch and you catch him again, and then you paddle him harder. Pretty soon he learns. But it's a waste of breath just to scold him. Then I added, I guess you've never raised pups. Many. I'm raising a dachshund now, by your methods. Let's get back to those juvenile criminals. The most vicious, averaged, somewhat younger than you here in this class, and they often started their lawless careers much younger. Let us never forget that puppy. These children were often caught. Police arrested, batches each day. Were they scolded? Yes, often scathingly. Were their noses rubbed in it? Rarely. News organs and officials usually kept their names secret. Take with you what comment you think I was making. In many places, the law required so for criminals under 18. Were they spanked? Indeed not. Many had never been spanked even as small children. There was a widespread belief that spanking, or any punishment involving pain, did a child permanent psychic damage. Corporal punishment in schools was forbidden by law. He had gone on. Flogging was lawful as sentence of court only in one small province, Delaware, and there only for a few crimes, and was rarely invoked. It was regarded as cruel and unusual punishment. Dubois had mused aloud. I do not understand objections to cruel and unusual punishment. While a judge should be benevolent in purpose, his awards should cause the criminal to suffer, else there is no punishment. And pain is the basic mechanism built into us by a million years of evolution, which safeguards us by warning when something threatens our survival. Why should society refuse to use such a highly perfected survival mechanism? However, that period was loaded with pre-scientific, pseudo-psychological nonsense. As for unusual, punishment must be unusual, or it serves no purpose. He then pointed his stump at another boy. What would happen if a puppy were spanked every hour? It would probably drive him crazy. Probably, it certainly will not teach him anything. How long has it been since the principal of this school last had to switch a pupil? I'm not sure, about 2 years. Long enough. It means that such punishment is so unusual as to be significant, to deter, to instruct, back to these young criminals. They probably were not spanked as babies. They certainly were not flogged for their crimes. The usual sequence was, for a first offense, a warning, a scolding, often without trial. After several offenses, a sentence of confinement, both sentence suspended, and the youngster placed on probation. A boy might be arrested many times and convicted several times more before he was punished, and then it would be merely confinement, with others like him from whom he learned still more criminal habits. If he kept out of major trouble while confined, he could usually evade most of even that mild punishment, be given probation, paroled in the jargon of the times. This incredible sequence could go on for years, while his crimes increased in frequency and viciousness, with no punishment whatever save rare, dull but comfortable confinements. Then, usually by law, on his 18th birthday, this so-called juvenile delinquent becomes an adult, and sometimes wound up in only weeks or months in a death cell waiting for execution for murder. Suppose you merely scolded your puppy, but never punished him. Let him go making all messes in the house, and occasionally locked him up in an outbuilding. But soon let him back into the house with a warning not to do it again. Then one day you notice that he's now a grown dog, and still not housebroken. Whereupon you whip out a gun and shoot him dead. Well, I think, um, I think you get the idea. My point is, I'm not sure I necessarily entirely agree with Robert Heinlein here, or Mr. Dubois. There's big arguments about whether or not Heinlein agrees with the philosophy of the book. But it's safe to say that the idea of we do need punishment is very important, and it starts in the home. It definitely starts in the home. And I think the book goes on to say there's no such thing as a juvenile delinquent, only a delinquent parent. Because it's our responsibility to instill those values into the children when they're young. My parents did not always have it easy. And my parents still did their best to try and instill values in me. And so I think, you know, a lot of what a lot of what he's talking about here is happening in the world around us, and we can see very clear parallels to the modern day. The courts are ineffective. The courts are ineffective, except when people do try to be principled, which is a whole other thing in of itself. The parents aren't instilling values in their children. We're not holding people to account, and we're encouraging delinquent criminal behavior. Why is it that we encourage, to use Heinlein's analogy, if your dog is pissing on the floor, well, you don't give him a jug of water and hook him up to an IV catheter. You don't give him a jug of water, hook him up to a catheter that sprays directly on your rug. That's what a safe consumption site is. It's a catheter directly onto your rug for your dog to piss all over it. And I know they shut it down, but the after effects of creating an open market of commerce for drug addicts to galore to just, deal as they wish, it's what's happened. And now we're stuck with it. We have to reap the consequences for, where do they live? Where do they live? Well, I'll tell you where they live. Oh, they live in the uplands. They live far south. Where is that? Sundance? I don't even remember what it's called. I'm not rich. Nor is anyone else I know. And so we don't get that escape. We don't get to live in a suburb. We got to deal with it firsthand. Anyway. I think my point's been made. I definitely want to talk more about Starship Troopers. I've read you that section, and I might read more later. But I think I'll briefly mention what the people who were protesting the Galt Gardens fence. They said, we need to build houses, not fences. But like the puppy needs to be housebroken, so do the homeless drug addicts and the criminals. If you give them a house, you're just giving them more surface area to piss on. If you give them this free housing in a nice neighborhood of affordable housing, that's not a neighborhood. That is a ghetto. By definition, that is a ghetto. And so it's quite ironic that they want to build a ghetto to put all the drug addicts and then think it's going to be some kind of nice neighborhood. I guarantee you, those people, Those people at that protest who live in Sundance Ridge, who live in the uplands, who live probably even far on the west side, they would avoid that ghetto like the plague. And I guarantee you that already they avoid Galt Gardens like the plague. They probably all go to the University of Lethbridge. They all go to the University of Lethbridge, which is on the west side. It's far away. They don't have to deal with that. They work in a nice, well, they probably don't even work. If they're not from Lethbridge, their parents are probably wealthy and give them free money. My point's been made. My point's been made. And I'm sure anyone watching this is already well aware of all of these issues and all of these hypocrisies. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's naturally frustrating. And I think it's quite silly that we have a platform. We let these people just, I don't know, because they didn't build that fence. And what are they doing to solve the drug addict crisis now? Anyway, um, Starship Troopers. Very good book. If you have the time to read it, I recommend it.